I want to talk just a little bit about your presidential platform. You want to talk a little bit about hope and authentic healing?
Sure. I mean, yes, absolutely. Because I mean, it's seeing this in action. I mean, like I feel the convention was a culmination of so many things that are possible.
This is the Healing Center Conversations podcast. We have a very special episode, and I am thrilled to introduce you all to two people, two women, two Black women who I have tremendous respect for. Dr. Celeste Malone, Dr. Sherrie Proctor, two women, two trailblazers who have done tremendous work in the field of school psychology. And the truth is, they really don't need an introduction. We're doing this podcast because at this point, most people have heard about the racist incidents that happened at NASP 2023 in Denver. And we wanted to create space to have a healing center conversation. And what I want to do for this conversation as a Black male school psychologist is to create space and to fall back, to know my role. I had a healing center conversation with Celeste. This had to be a little over a year ago now, right? About a year ago. And one of the things that we talked about is the platform that I've created, the work that I've created, and making sure that I'm doing everything that I can, to understand how I show up, how I engage, how I'm uplifting people and just supporting Black women in general. And y'all, we can't have a Healing Sense of Conversations podcast if I'm not willing to have Healing Sense of Conversations. And that conversation was okay, there are some things that I can do better. And, from that moment, I've always purposed to just do better in all my interactions and all my engagement and make sure that I'm legit using my platform, recognizing the platform, the voice that I have, not diminishing it, and then using it to make sure that people voices are heard who otherwise will be historically marginalized. And, with Denver, that was an opportunity for me to do just that. This is one of those opportunities where you can use your platform and still make space for Black women. So that's enough on my end. Listen, y'all, what I'm going to do, I gave you the introductions. I'm going to make space for two phenomenal, sensational. And listen, I got two flowers. If you're listening on audio, go to the YouTube page, check out the video. I got two big flowers. One for Celeste, one for Sherrie. And I'm giving you all your flowers right here today, right now. I admire you all. I have tremendous respect for y'all. And I can't wait for this Healing Center conversation. So, ladies, it's on you. Oh, and one more thing. Dr. Proctor, aka Oprah, aka your favorite new host, is taking over.
Hey.
Dr. Proctor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. McClure. What a beautiful introduction for us, Celeste, right?
It was very inspiring, very, very Byron.
Yeah, love him. So first, I just want to start, Celeste, just by letting you know, and I try to say this to you all the time, that I'm proud of you and I love you. My heart just bursts with pride for you and who you are personally, but for our field and what you represent in the present and what you represent for us as we move forward as a field. So I just want to start the conversation just to let you know, love you, proud of you.
Love you right back. And I'm it's too early to start with teary-eyed moments. We just started. But thank you so much. And when Byron reached out about us having this conversation, and we could certainly talk, and Byron and I do talk a lot. We debriefed this experience, and just throughout my presidency, we chatted. But it's different talking to another Black woman about it because I'm always so aware of how I move, how I show up, and the importance of doing that and being my authentic self. Mm-hmm. And as I've said to you multiple times, you have been a role model of that in the profession. So of course, I want to have this conversation with you, and I am grateful that you found time amidst your very busy schedule to take the time for this.
It's such an honor. It really, truly is. So how are you? How are you doing, Celeste?
I'm working towards okay. And I feel like I'm getting closer to that every day. I mean, it's been 2 weeks at this point. Yeah, yesterday was just 2 weeks of the incident, and it's still ongoing in conversations with the Hyatt. I'm hoping, I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll have resolution by the end of the week. But at any rate, I used the long weekend over President's Weekend to kind of get back to myself, because I had been spending pretty much every waking hour since I've been back from Denver, really since this incident occurred, dealing with it in some capacity. And so those last 2 days of convention, all of my other plans were derailed. Had some events that I had to go to, such as the EDI town hall. But other than that, I really didn't go to much, because it was either random meetings or just trying to take a step back and take care of myself as well. And that continued when I got home. So it was tough. Even though I know about racial stress and trauma, it's different when you're experiencing it for yourself. And so like I knew that I was feeling off. I honored the fact that I was feeling off, but I didn't expect to feel as off as I did or as long as I did either. So it just got to a point, just making sure that I was getting enough rest and doing the basics and not doing much of anything else. But over the weekend, where I finally put away all of my clothes from Denver, I straightened up around the house. It was moving towards things to kind of reclaim my time and energy, and doing some of the routines that made me feel me. So I did that. I wouldn't say that was like last weekend. And so again, feeling some type of peace with whatever the outcome. As I told colleagues, that you can't expect justice in an inherently unjust system. This is why we need to change and transform our worlds. But I do know and feel confident that the outcomes of this will give us some resources, as well as just ideas, thoughts, visions, motivation to create this new world. So that's how I've reconciled and made peace with this. And that's also what's helping me feel more okay and getting back to normal, and the work that still exists, because I want to get back to that. This has taken up a lot of time, and got things to do.
So, it's so interesting when we experience racial trauma, because one of the things often I think is that we are asked to recall that trauma. And so I'm actually going to ask you to talk to us a little bit about what happened. But what I want to say to you, which I think is important, is that if you don't want to talk about what happened, then that's perfectly fine as well. We can have a conversation without getting into details. My main thing is I would like to make sure that listeners have a context and truly understand what took place at NASP in Denver a couple of weeks ago. So let me just ask you, you want to get into it, or you're not feeling up to it?
I could definitely get into it, and I'm sure in the show notes could ask Byron to put a link to some more comprehensive sources, because I agree that I want to give folks some context for our discussion. But then I also want to talk about, I think there's so much more that has come from it, and want to have space to talk about that as well. So just as a recap, on the Wednesday evening of convention, held a reception in my suite, as most presidents do. Wednesday is technically day 2 of convention, but it's the biggest day of convention. That's when we have the general session. But even before then, the day had started with the distinguished lecture by, not the distinguished lecture, the Legends Address with Dr. Antoinette Miranda. And that was a packed crowd, and a great moment as well, to celebrate her as the first person of color to ever give the Legends Address. And while she was giving her address, I'm getting text messages that the ballroom was already filling up. And this is about an hour and a half before the general session. They're like, we've never seen anything like this, that there are people here already. It was certainly this packed space. And talking to Dr. Jen Wright beforehand, who was also in awe of being able to see a school psychologist, and explaining to him what some of the energy was about. I'm like, well, we haven't really been together in a couple of years, so there's that. But then I'm also the second Black president. The last one was about 25 years ago. So we're kind of, people are a little bit hyped, which she definitely understood. everything about the general session, from the Indigenous reading and opening, my presidential remarks, as well as our keynote, people were feeling good. And it was just this good vibe all throughout Wednesday, culminating into this reception that was in my suite. And so I was coming from awards, the NASP awards. So I was a little bit late. My friends and other folks from Howard, they had started it already. So I got up there probably like around 7:30. And even as I was getting changed in my room next door, I texted my friend and my nephew like, hey, is there anyone up here? I'm like, I don't hear anything. They're like, are there people here? Let's send you a picture. But just being in that space, I titled it HU and Friends intentionally. I'm faculty at Howard University. I have been there. I'm on leave right now, so this would technically be year 9. But I wanted to share this experience with a lot of the current students in the program, a lot of the alum of the program, because I started traditions of us getting together at NASP and at least having dinner together, spending some type of time together. Faculty from the program, former faculty from the program, as well as supervisors and other guests. The friends part was used fairly liberally because there are a lot of friends of the program, people who are friends of the program, as well as people who supported me. So it was truly a sea of Black excellence. It was truly this beautiful space and event to be in. Which was important for me to create that as well, because we don't get that. You know, I've been to many a gathering in a president's suite since I've been on board. And it's a very different type of feel. Like, I know I'm there because of my, my leadership role, and I develop these connections, but it's not the same as like being there or feeling that you truly belong in this space. And so I wanted to create that type of feeling, like this is really for us, that we could be in these spaces, give my students especially this experience, and just us, our community. And yes, a president's reception, but being intentional about curating the space so that everything about the convention feels that inclusive part.
Yeah. Can I just jump in really quick and just say thank you for that? And I say thank you because I think this year was the first year at NASP that I realized I'm almost 50. It's like, I can come to Celeste's party and stay for a few minutes, and then I got to go to sleep. So I came, and it was beautiful. It was a beautiful space that you curated. And I literally want to say thank you. A couple of my students came a little bit later in the evening, and one of the things that one of my students shared was, and I know you'll describe kind of what took place, but even in the midst of it happening, my student was in such awe of the beauty of Blackness and excellence that was happening in that space, that even after it happened, was still caught up in the beauty of the moment. And so I just want you to hear that, because I know, as people talk about this and think about this event, a lot of it is what was taken away, but a lot of it was not taken away, in the sense that the beauty, the joy, the excellence can never be erased.
Ever, 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 ever. And thank you so much for sharing those words as well, because I feel the same thing, that it had a really abrupt and terrible end, which I'll describe in a moment. But this is something that anyone who was there will always remember and hold with them as they persist throughout their career. When those moments, those times when it gets hard, knowing that there is a community of school psychs out there, because I'm very fortunate, and I know I'm going on a bit of a detour, but being at Howard, I remind my students how fortunate they are. Like, the rest of school psychology is not like Howard. It's not like our program. And to demonstrate authenticity, for that to prepare them for what it'll be like when they go to some of their practicum settings, especially when they go off on internship, if they're leaving the DC metro area. But yeah, to talk about that. But when you think about so many others who don't have the space that Howard does, and are truly feeling in isolation, and no one to even talk to them about what to expect, to know that there's this whole community here, that's incredibly important. They won't forget it, Like they'll go back to their respective programs. And even though physically they may be the only, they know and feel connected to this broader community. And that part can't be shaken at all. Yeah. So, and I said something to that effect. I gave a toast, like around 9:20-ish or so, saying a lot of those things and thanking people for being there and for their support, that I recognize that me being in this role is not just about me, but it's due to the support and care of my community. A lot of the actions that I take, and as I was telling someone earlier, we've been gifted a roadmap of what to do to make our profession better. It's been ignored. And so for so many people in that room, you included, but also Antoinette, so many other, and Janine, that the work that you all do, I read and internalize that, and I bring that with me to my leadership as we're talking about making policies and practices for the profession. I gave special recognition to grad students. They're next up. That it's been we've waited 25 years for this moment. We can't let it be another 25. And so to find the motivation to keep on going, because for so many of them, this is the school psych they know. What they experienced in Denver, that's their vision of school psych, and reminding them that this is going to be the new normal, that we can't go back. Like, once you've experienced this, can you really go back to what it was previously? Not without like fighting for it. And so giving this speech, it's on Twitter, lots of folks recording it, which was also a special experience, seeing all the phones out around me. But it was shortly after that, maybe about 10 minutes. And funnily enough, I was joking, and I've said this to people before a convention, said it multiple times. I'm like, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if security shuts everything down just because I know that security often comes to these things, but people talk their way out of it. Like I know people who have sweet talked their way out of security at 2:00 in the morning, all kinds of things like that. But I also know that I'm Black, even though I'm the president of the association, and seeing all of these Black people in one space, that increases the likelihood of that happening exponentially. And shortly after that, I'm hearing some folks like, oh, hotel security is at the door. They wanted to know whose room it is. So I go to the door. There are 2 hotel staff there, a white man and a white woman. The white man asks, is this my room? I said yes. And he said that there have been several noise complaints. Everybody needs to leave. And I'm going to stay here until everybody does. So tell folks that, like, okay, well, we need to leave, and word is spreading, but people leave quickly. And that's the other part of it, the relative normalcy of an interruption like that everyone knew what to do, that it wasn't something that we could fight or protest. Like, we knew it was wrong. We knew it was definitely wrong, because there hadn't been any complaints. Like, they hadn't come to us previously, because typical practice and I've seen these types of things happen, if there is a noise issue, they come and they give you a warning. So they may either come to your room, they may call your room to say that, like, hey, we received several calls or whatever have you, to keep it down. None of that happened. It was, there have been several complaints. You all need to go now. And as I told people that we have to go, everyone quickly left. So quickly, when you think that security was standing right there and they weren't going to leave. And he said that he wasn't going to leave, to the point where some people forgot it left stuff in the room. Yeah, so I also spent a couple of days trying to reunite people with their lost items. Because they felt like, okay, we'll need to comply. And so there's that reaction of it, knowing that our anger is valid, but we can't express it because it'll make the situation worse. And I'm sure they felt it, knowing that for themselves personally, but then also for me, that like, okay, like, we're being in this space, we don't want any harm to come of Celeste either. So people left quickly. There were a few folks that stayed. So my nephew and my best friend, they had come for the convention to celebrate with me, and then a few other school psych colleagues. Everyone was just cleaning up, because now we got to get everything straightened up. And so the security guard, he didn't just stand at my door, he came in the living room of the suite.
Oh.
And so just to give people some imagery, this is a suite. Think about it as like your apartment or something like that. It's a large area. The room capacity is 75 people. It is made for entertaining. There is a bar. There's a bar there, a bar that they provide, by the way, because the space is meant for entertaining, that their refreshing the bar was part of our food and beverage contract. So yes, people entertain in this space.
Right. It's designed for entertaining.
It is designed for entertaining. And I also want to add, I think I mentioned before, this is only like around 9:30 at night that this is happening. And again, I have seen these events go into the wee hours of the morning. So the security guard is standing in the living room of my suite while my friends and family are there cleaning up.
Wow.
And he's like, the only person that could be in here is the person whose name is on the room reservation, and you're the only one. And I'm like, well, they're with me. And so I have, in addition to this entertaining area, the parlor area, I was staying in a 1-bedroom suite that was adjoining to it. And then my nephew was staying in a hotel room that was connected to the other side. So I had both sides of it. So I'm like, no, they are with me. They are with me. And like, well, the only people that could be on here whose names are on the reservation, so we'll need to go downstairs and have with your IDs to have everyone's names added to the reservation. I'm like, no, we're not doing that. So are you saying that so people staying in the hotel are not allowed to have people in their rooms? Am I supposed to be up here by myself for the rest of my time here? Like, well, if everyone comes downstairs, we could all get you added to the reservation. I'm like, fine, if you want us to clear the parlor, but you're telling me that I can't have people in my sleeping area in the suite next door. And so that's when he backed up some, because that's when he realized that I essentially was the only one on the floor. The suite that I was staying in is the largest suite in the hotel. And as I mentioned, I had an adjoining 1-bedroom suite and an adjoining room where my nephew was staying. So he said, well, there better not be any noise complaints. And he let everybody else stay.
Now, Celeste, okay. NASP always gets the presidential suite, right? Have you ever heard of anything like this happening in the history of NASP conventions?
Ever. I have heard epic stories where security has come multiple times and people famously have talked their way out of security. So the party keeps on going and the same security guard comes back like, I told you so. And I've heard those type of stories, but never. And keep in mind, this is 9:30. The hotel quiet hours don't start until 10. So yeah. And so I said from the beginning what it was about, too many Black folks coming upstairs. What I did not realize was earlier that day when I was at the awards reception, they had made some surveillance type comments because my friends were in the suite setting up because I had the event catered. They had called downstairs to get some more plates. Because keep in mind, everything else was stocked there. I had full glassware and everything else that they provide. They called downstairs for plates. They were going back and forth. Well, how many do you need? And like, well, we just need a couple of plates. So when they came up, and this was at like 6 something, and my friend Erin Harper, she posted two TikTok videos that detailed this. But even from 6 o'clock, they're seeing Black women setting up in a suite. Well, don't get too rowdy. Don't get too rowdy.
Oh, really?
Rowdy, this is an interesting choice of words. And again, would you say this to anybody else? And so I didn't know about that until afterwards, but what I did know in this moment that what noise complaints, and if there were noise complaints, then we should have gotten a warning and definitely should not have come into the suite to make sure that everybody leaves and then trying to tell me that everybody staying there, people who were there cleaning up. And again, at this point, it's maybe 9:45, it's early, that I can't have anybody in this huge suite that I'm supposed to be there by myself the entire time.
It's almost unbelievable, except for the system of oppression that is racism.
Right. It's the most it's unbelievable, but completely believable,
Right.
and predictable at the same time. That of course something like this would happen. Of course.
Yes. So you did a town hall at NASP, and that happened on what, Thursday of NASP? So
Thursday.
that was the day after.
Yeah.
And now I was presenting with my research team at the time, so I didn't come, but I've heard reflections on that town hall, and even Byron described your body language and listening to your message. And then Tara Ratings actually mentioned that you have to relive the trauma that was still fresh from that evening in front of the room at the town hall. So like, here you are.
Yeah.
Experiencing this racial trauma, and then you got to get up and lead like you always do. I mean, tell me.
It was hard. And it was already on the schedule. This is probably our 4th time having it, and by far the most people that have ever been there. A couple of people had reached out like, oh, they're going to be using the town hall. I'm like, well, this is the perfect use of it. This was already on the schedule. People are seeing the story unfold because NASP released its first statement that morning, and it didn't have all of the specifics, but just that that they're aware of this incident, that they're supporting me. I believe I retweeted that thread as well. Just kind of where I'm at the moment. But yeah, it was a lot. And so I had gotten a couple of texts like, we need to get a bigger room for this. Is there any way we could get a bigger room? I'm like, how many people are possibly there? And then walking up, I'm like, wow, there are a lot of people there because it spilled out into the hallway. The room couldn't accommodate everyone. So for context, there were how the room was set up. There were probably maybe around like 7 round tables, 8 to 10 seats apiece. All of those were filled, people sitting on the floor against the walls, people spilling out into the hallway. It was a lot of folks, and it was a lot just to walk through that crowd because I had gone, you had given your lecture that morning, and after that I went back to my room and I really hadn't been, I wasn't out since then. Like ate lunch in the suite, was just around friends, and part of that recharge stuff because it's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. And in so many ways, I feel like, the story of Black women is beautiful. We are beautiful. I don't even understand another way to conceptualize Black women, but also the trauma that we experience that is brought on by society and how we are treated, but then having to always, it seems, play that role of helping other people understand what that trauma is, helping other people think about what to do in response to that trauma. That's what I've been seeing so much of from, just the information that I see. It feels to me like you're doing a lot of work in response to trauma you experience. What do you
that is true. I think about it like the experience of the town hall and having to retell the story to everybody and kind of break it down and hearing everybody processing and their comments, which was a lot because I know it just wasn't me. It was everyone in that room who felt the hurt of the incident itself, but then also felt hurt because I was hurt. Just talking to my best friend and my nephew, 2 non-school psychologists, and who quickly got embraced by the people around them in my circle of friends. They're like, you got cool friends, and they're there for you. And I'm like, yeah, this is how our community rolls. But for them, the people who've known me the longest, it was really, really hard for them because they know me so well.
Yes.
And for them, and they've seen and known me my entire life. And just like, I've never seen you like this before. that they could tell how hurt I was, and just trying and knowing to navigate it, and that I will do this because this is me and this is what I do. But it hurt them seeing me experiencing that, and then knowing what I was carrying with me as I have to go do all of these other things. And so as people came up to talk, and Byron was one of them, Tara spoke as well, admonishing people, well, one, to remind them to be grateful for the story that I just shared. And, you know, the fact, and acknowledging the fact that this is reliving trauma, that this isn't just another story or event that happened, that she is reliving this as, you know, being made to talk about this in front of this whole audience. But hearing other people do it and the raw emotions, it was all a lot. And so in terms of the body language, when you're in general, when you're sitting on a dais, it's hard to know where to look or what to do, because it's just an awkward place to be. People are oriented to look towards the front, and you have someone on a podium next to you. And so it's awkward in general, but it's awkwarder, more awkward as I'm hearing and processing and like, well, where do I look? And so I'm just kind of sitting, not looking in any direction in particular. And trying to hold together, you know, of course, I'm feeling a whole wide range of emotions through this whole experience. And so just
have you just had a time where you were just alone and you actually just cried, you know, just let all your emotions out about this experience?
Yeah. So it's been a few times, but I would say the first was that Thursday morning, right? When you had this whole thing that happened. And then the conversations and the strategizing, well, what is our response going to be? Me calling Kathy Minke to let her, our NASP executive director, to let her know right away what happened, so we could address that in the morning. And I'll come back to that conversation and NASP's role in throughout all of this. But managing a lot of people, because emotions were high. And so, and you know our people, when you think about the people who were in that room.
Well, I was just, you know, before our conversation, I was thinking about Black protest and the different ways we can protest. And within our community, we have
all of them. All of them. We have all of them represented there.
We do.
But also thinking about the type and the framing of the response, because messaging matters and how we go about it. And I know that we are all really angry right now, and this was unfair, and it happened here, but a couple of things need to happen first. In our messaging, this happened at the NASP convention, but this is Hyatt's issue. Let's be absolutely clear about that. That's not muddy the other convention waters with this. This is squarely on the Hyatt. So making sure to keep your energy there, but then also highlighting what was interrupted and focusing on Black joy. Joy is a humanizing force. And so talking, but all of this is additional labor as well. So this is in the aftermath, and I'm processing my emotions, but then also as a leader, there is a response that's needed. Like talking as president, the executive director is your best friend. The president shouldn't surprise the executive director should not surprise the president. So my first call, I'm like, do not do anything. I need to talk to Kathy. And, you know, getting that, but then also framing what to do, because something needed to be done, something needed to be said. People are going to post about it. We need to be strategic and kind of planning that out. And so it's like a mini war room in the suite afterwards, that someone was typing out, making sure that we had a detailed narrative of the experience while it was still fresh in.
Okay. Qualitative researchers come through.
Other folks to just like, all right, well, can we get some sample social media? Like, well, if I tweet this, well, then you retweet it and get it in and tagging folks and coordinating around social media and getting the information out there, but also crafting the narrative that we want about it and taking control of that. But again, all of that is labor. And so I remember waking up on Thursday morning. And so I am a music person. So I always listen to music when I'm showering and getting ready. And so there's this one particular song. I'm a huge fan of the rapper Nas. And on one of his recent albums, he has this song called Nas is Good. And it had been almost like a mini anthem to me. Reason being, like in the first verse, it describes how Rome, we're told and Egypt is they try to separate Egypt and saying that it's not in Africa. Like I remember hearing this from teachers when I was in school. He mentioned that, but like everything that Rome has, they took from Egypt. And, when you go to Egypt, they look like us, and having this excellence and pharaohs and all of this stuff and opulence, that's part of our birthright. And we came a long way to get, there. He's known for having all his flossy stuff and everything like that. But the reason why I had kind of embraced it when I first heard this song is that I know that this is a lot of work around the presidency. I know that kind of like my approach to a lot of things is that like, okay, well, do the things that you're doing the things because they need to get done. And that's that. Like, it's not for any particular recognition or anything, like you're doing it because it needs to get done. And this is your job and this is your responsibility. But in the midst of this, to also embrace all of the fun and flossy things, because I do deserve those things as part of, as the work that I put in over the years in being as president, that I deserve all of, I deserve all of that, like being in a suite that was so beautiful. And just
you deserve that and more, more. I've watched you over the years put in all the work.
And so I was getting ready that Thursday morning, and that song came on, and I just like burst into tears in the background, because that, and all the flossiness of it, and enjoying the suite, and being able to, I even remember getting the floor plans, and when Kathy was like, I think this is a suite that you're going to have, and feeling like, wow, we're about to ball out in here, like all of the things. And like I said before, I had been to multiple presidents' suites, but given the demographics of the profession and especially our leadership, it's not going to look, you're going to be the one of only. You are truly going to be a minority in that space. And so seeing it, it was just like, oh, I cannot wait to share this with my friend. Like, I know we're just going to be up in here and enjoying all of that. And that was a large part of the excitement that I felt. And that's what that Wednesday reception was about. And it was just that crashing realization of kind of like everything, where I just, it was that release, because it was getting so much done in that. Well, it's convention itself is so much of a whirlwind. Oh my goodness. And our first one in person in a couple of years, and we brought back our regional leadership meetings in person. And we hadn't done that since before COVID. So there was a lot happening, and just like go, had a full board meeting, the regional leadership meetings, and a leadership assembly meeting. That was a huge amount of meeting prep. And then getting through Wednesday in the general session, like now, this is your time to chill and ride out the rest of convention. With Wednesday night being that peak, and that part, all of these things that I work towards and celebrate, and for it to end like
in that way. And that, I think, is one of the toughest things about what happened, is that, you've worked so hard, not just once you got to Denver at the convention. Like what has culminated are years and years and years that you've put into this profession, and into your work, and into being a faculty member, and just giving and giving and giving. I remember landing in Denver, and the first thing on my mind was, oh, we're about to celebrate with Celeste, and we're going to celebrate Celeste. Like, I probably wouldn't have, even to be honest with you, I've been so burnt out, I probably wouldn't even come to NASP if you had asked me to do the lecture. But also because no matter what, whether you asked me to do the lecture or not, like, I was coming to celebrate you, and to celebrate this occasion in our profession, and had so much hope, that, And it was celebratory, like they didn't take that from us, but it should not have had any marks on it at all. Like this should have been just all out, celebration. So I want to talk just a little bit about your presidential platform. You want to talk a little bit about hope and authentic healing?
Sure. I mean, yes, absolutely. Because I mean, it's seeing this in action. I mean, like I feel the convention was a culmination of so many things that are possible. Because as we've talked about social justice, as school psychologists have been working to embrace it comes from this like very deficit-y type approach that we recognize that there are marginalized kids that need to be rescued and helped. And so it's moving, and I recognize that this is a journey and a developmental process in terms of the learning, but that's kind of where we were at as a profession, that social justice, yes, it's morally the right thing to do, but it's not you're doing this on behalf of these poor kids, right? That social justice is more expansive. It is about the opportunities to live your absolutely best life. And equity is the minimum, because we need to go further back and like, well, what if we never had to deal with any of this in the first place? This is what we're aiming towards. And to have that expansiveness and that imagination that, quite frankly, we lack in the profession. We are very rule driven and compliance oriented, and as a discipline, we are taught to think in ways that reduce complexity, that to think of and to focus on simplest explanations, because this will lead to whatever intervention comes next, and you do these respective steps. And so it's this very type of in the box thinking. And so recognizing that social justice is meant to be expansive, that we're exploding the whole box. And that's what the theme was essentially about, to anchor social justice to its anti-oppressive roots, because there has been, I won't even say drift, because I don't think it was how at least it was initially presented to school psychologists. That part wasn't emphasized or anchored as strongly as it should be. It was more in terms of these disparate outcomes, but without the linkage as to why. And so that means it's not just with working on getting these equity, but you're not going to get equity unless you talk about oppression. And so linking it back very much to its anti-oppressive roots. And with that acknowledgement that social justice isn't something that you're doing for marginalized individuals. Social justice is to the good of society, because we are all interlinked when we look at an intersectional framework, that we are all connected in some way, shape, or form, unless you are privileged in all of the areas. And I mean all of the areas. They're going to come at oppression is going to come after you at some point. You may not be as high up on the list, but it's coming for you. And so it's recognizing and emphasizing as well the shared responsibility and humanity, and that it doesn't have to be this way, that all of this is socially constructed, but that doesn't make it any less real. But it's a reminder, because this is a construction, we can reconstruct something new, and outside of these oppressive norms and boundaries. And so ultimately, that's what authentic hope, radical hope, authentic healing is all about, recognizing and being able to visualize what it could be, and having that in the forefront, as opposed to thinking of what we lack, thinking about what we want. What is it that we're actually working towards? What would it look like if we got all these things that we are constantly asking for? Because what happens is that you get them and you don't know what to do with it, because you're always complaining. And so it's helping to engage the importance of that visioning, and then the healing perspective, a deeper understanding of oppression, that we cannot talk social justice without oppression. And then through the president's messages, describing it in action in ways that we haven't really talked about in the field, in these everyday acts that we do, in the ways that we think or look at situations, to bring a different lens to it, so that we could engage in more healing-centered work.
And I feel like in terms of the conference, like I felt like that was a very successful theme. I felt it, like, walking around the conference, I was like, okay, like this feels different than what I've felt at conferences in the past. And so I think in so many ways, it was such a successful conference, in spite of unfortunate incidents. And I think that's the thing that, like that many of us, while we're advocating and fighting for justice in that specific situation, I think many of us are still reeling and feeling from the whole conference theme and the overall feeling of that conference, that you truly felt like this something different is happening in our profession at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, if you build it, they will come. And so the theme itself is a clear signal to what type of presentations will be accepted, not just accepted, but welcomed and encouraged in this conference. Because like I said earlier, the roadmap is there. Black scholars from other racial, ethnic, minoritized identities and other marginalized groups really do lay this out, because they're thinking and crafting of a place in a profession and schools where they could feel affirmed also. So the work is definitely there and present, but we need to create those spaces for it to be highlighted. It was hard choosing the sessions for the President's Strand, but that was such a good problem to have, because people really, they saw the theme and they said, okay, I got this. And submitted some, like the content, I think, of the conference was amazing.
It was really great. So I want to talk a little bit before we wrap up things. I want to make sure that we have a conversation about the presidency in general, of being the president of NASP. So last time you mentioned this when we started, Deborah Crockett is the last Black president of NASP, and that was what, 25 years ago?
25 years ago, yeah.
Now I feel old because I actually met her around the time of her presidency, so that's telling you a lot. But I'm also looking forward to this conversation that you and Deborah are going to have. It's going to be great. It's the Black School Psych Network Conference here in Atlanta, April 27th and 28th. And I've been wanting for years for you and Deborah Crockett to sit down and have a conversation. And girl, this is going to be good. Like, I can't wait, because Deborah is Deborah and you are you, and it's just going to be fantastic. So I'm really looking forward to it. But it's other young people coming up behind us, younger scholars, younger practitioners who might be interested in leadership that would lead them to being the next Black president of NASP after you. So talk to us just a little bit about what are some of your highs and lows in this role as president of NASP?
Yeah, and definitely we need folks getting into the leadership pipeline, because there cannot be another 25 years before another Black president, or from other racial, ethnic, minoritized group, of which there have been none. So no Asian, Latina, Indigenous, Asian Pacific Islander, like, no, there hasn't been. So yes, we definitely need to broaden the pipeline. But it's been this incredibly, incredibly rewarding experience. It's different from, I guess, what a lot of people think of leadership, myself included, where it can become this very task-oriented thing. Because usually when we're involved in groups, there are things that we are doing. But being in this type of role, it's less task-oriented, but this broader visionary piece and big problems and big solutions, big picture type of thinking, which I really appreciate. I've always had an interest in professional issues in school psychology with a focus on multiculturalism, social justice. Graduate education is probably where I have my deepest knowledge area. But to write about professional issues means that I had to know a lot about the profession. And I got interested in leadership in the first place was because I wanted and felt that we needed better standards around multicultural and diversity education. And me, as a first-year doctoral student, I find out that it's determined by NASP and APA. And so I'm like, well, somebody needs to tell NASP and APA that we need to do better in this regard. And so that was an entry point to leadership. And so I think it's about also identifying what it is that you want to change, and recognizing that professional association work is very much a route to make that happen. I think leadership is an area that we don't talk about as much when we think about our professional associations. It's, well, I was told to join, and so I joined, or I'm doing this so I could get the discount to go to a convention, or it's my NCSP renewal, about really recognizing that what is produced, the resources that are being produced, the policy statements, position papers that are being made, the advocacy that's occurring, those are very real people that are making those decisions. And if we are not represented, if these people are not representative of the profession, or really where we want the profession to go, so recognizing the increasing diversity in our leadership, reflecting that, so we could have different perspectives and thoughts influencing the work that we do and shaping the profession itself, that it's important to be involved. Whether it's your local school psych association, your grad program, or in your school district, your state association, as well as NASP boards and committees, it's this opportunity to use your expertise in a unique way to make a broader influence. And so I found that part very, very rewarding about the platform, and also just being able to make some changes broadly within the association itself, because something that I'm very big on, and would also, I can't wait to talk to Deborah about this more, like when I was doing the EDI, the Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Implementation Task Force, I prepared a timeline of diversity, social justice related events within NASP. And as part of that, I reached out to the chair of professional positions to find out the original adoption date for our position statements. And so looking at some of those directed towards diversity, social justice issues. And the one around recruiting and retaining grad students of color caught my eye, because I thought it was a later one, but it was first adopted in the late 80s. And so that led me into this whole rabbit hole of looking at the communique and looking and piecing other parts together, and recognizing Dr. Crockett's influence in being a NASP leader, from leadership assembly and being involved in multicultural affairs, to then serving on the board of directors and as president. But then there was this long fallow period where nothing was happening. And I just remember staring at this blank space on the timeline, like, what, there's nothing here. And it was when she left the board, that's when things stopped. And it took a long time for it to pick up. And so with that, it's not about it should never be dependent on who the person is in this role. It's about building change that is going to be sustainable. And too often within our profession, we become reliant, like, oh, we got this. Like I know that there was all kinds of excitement, I'm sure. Like, we have our first Black president, we got this. School psychology, racism problem, we are good. I'm sure there was a lot of thought. Yeah, I'm sure there was a lot of that thoughts. But then as soon as she left, that part wasn't internalized. And so throughout my whole time on the board, but especially looking at my presidential years, as I will be leaving the board in another year and change, what are the structural changes that are needed, right? And building in those systems. I can say with confidence, and I know that there will be others that could corroborate, the way that NASP operates now within its leadership and how we do things is dramatically different now from when I started on the board. And a large part of that has been my influence, from creating structured report templates, from where we're discussing things, where it's explicitly calling out, how will this impact equity? Will it make disparities worse? Will this have the potential to make it better? What are the consequences if we don't do this? And laying these things out very explicitly, it forces people to think about these things as they're writing agenda items, but then also shapes the discussions that we have. Another thing was bringing in the use of process observers for our board meetings, and then we're using them more now for other meetings as well, where we're reflecting on how we do things. Because social justice, we could be very outcome oriented. I mean, that's consistent with white supremacy anyway, that unless it leads to a product, then your work is meaningless, right? Yes. But it's about how we do things. And so having a process observer has made us more cognizant of how we actually do our business and function and operate as a board. And so those are a couple of examples of not just things within the profession itself, but building in how do we make decisions and evaluate things in general. That's been a lasting legacy. Even our response, NASP support, just strong and vocal support of me from the very beginning, as well as a lot of the school psych community, especially our leaders in the profession. That's a reflection of a work a lot of folks have put in, but I know definitely that I contributed to that. So it's also affirming to see the outcomes of what has been years of work.
That's the first thing I thought about, is that I, if that happened a couple of years ago, NASP would not have come out with a response that quickly. Like, I am 100% confident about that. And so that was one of the first things I thought about when I saw the response. I immediately connected that to the work that has been done within the organization. And so I think that point you're making about, being within the organization and changing structures and things like that within the organization is such an important point. But tell me, because we both been in spaces, what's the most frustrating thing, Celeste? Talk about it, sis. I feel like frustrating.
It's a toss up between two, though. I guess it's really like two sides of the same point about it. So sometimes it's, having to do that explicit teaching role, right? And you're like really having to break it down and waiting and, to be patient as people are working through it and, bringing people along. So depending on what it is, it's like, isn't this obvious? We've been talking about this. I'm like, I know, like when you're teaching, I'm like, I know you know the answer because I know I taught you this. And so like, why are we
quiet? Why are we silent?
Yeah, like you should have an idea of what to do. And not be a total blank slate about it. So there's sometimes moments like that. It's still the experience of dealing with microaggressions. That's kind of unavoidable. That it's frustrating to know that even though I am the president of the association, to still receive microaggressions about related to my intellect or my ability or things of that nature. And people don't realize it either. And so that's the part about it. So that could be frustrating to deal with, because it's, do I say something now? Do I wait? Do I take the person aside? Do I just charge this one to the game?
All that additional labor. It's just additional labor every day of our lives.
And having to plan for that. And so when there are, when there are meeting topics where I know it's going to be harder to get people to understand it, and I'm having to lay that out, but I'm strategizing how to do so in the meeting and preparing talking points, but then also very much having to be aware that I don't sound like I'm going on some type of, because emotion could easily, it's more often construed in this negative valence when we do it. So I also have to be managing of that. So I enjoy it, but there's a lot of work that is required that is not visible, that is hard to describe in navigating our leadership is a microcosm of the profession. We have a variety of personalities in the profession. We have a variety of personalities in the leadership. And so it's a matter of knowing that, like, the sad reality of like, okay, I kind of expect it. And so it's that intersection of my race, my gender, and also specific to this role, age. I'm probably, I'm the youngest one in my school psychology memory. And so, so that's another factor too. And so I recognize that, like, that this is what it is, and trying to conserve and direct energy to where it needs to go. But Yeah, it's just a hidden extra
I saw
working the
it.
shenanigans of it all.
Of it all. And I feel like no matter what environment we're in as Black women, we're doing those negotiations, on top of like our actual jobs.
Yeah.
We're consistently negotiating people, the environment, trying to make sure that we're effective in what we need to do, but at the same time, manage all those microaggressions and aggressions. So I definitely want to leave on a positive note. I think one of the things that we have in common is our love for graduate education and the folks who are the future of our field. So talk to our students in your closing thoughts. Give them,
oh my goodness.
Yeah, tell them where we're headed. Tell them what's up. Like, it's so much to look forward to in our profession, I think.
There really is. And I'm excited to grad students. I'm excited that you are here, that you made the choice to enter school psychology. I want you to know that you are perfect to be in this field the way that you are, to be able to negotiate in this space and to carve out a space where you could truly be you. And what I mean by that is to show up, not feeling that you have to present yourself in a certain way, whether that's physical appearance, hair, things of that nature, that you could show up as you are. And this is what school psychology will be. I'm also excited because your new normal is a profession of school psychology, where a third of students are of racial, ethnic, minoritized backgrounds, that you as a body reflects the change that we are trying to achieve in the profession, and need you to stay here and to take ownership of it and to bring your knowledge and skills and talents to all facets of the profession, whether it's practice or academia or nonprofits. You enter leadership in a variety of spaces, but to bring your knowledge, your perspectives, and who you are and what brought you to the field to that, because this is how we change school psychology so that we could really reach its fullest potential.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. So how can people get in contact with you, Madam President?
So I am mostly on Twitter, and that is at cmonique1023. People have been trying to follow me on Instagram. I really don't get on Instagram like that. It's the same handle. But yeah, I'll go through those requests and maybe I'll post some pictures, but Twitter is the best place to reach me, at cmonique1023. And then email is celeste.m.malone@gmail.com.
I was just going to say, Dr. McClure is going to join us again, but before you hop on and hop in, Dr. McClure, I want to say this whole conversation, Celeste, is why I'm so proud of you. Like, it's like, how could we not be so proud of you? I'm going to end by just saying, sister, I love you.
I love you right back.
I love you.
There is nothing else that I need to say. Dr. Celeste Malone, Dr. Sherrie Proctor, thank you both for this healing-centered conversation. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to tag a friend. Make sure you share this. Make sure you post it. Everyone needs to hear this conversation. Thank you both. I want to share my admiration once again. I'm giving you all your flowers now. Thank you all. Until next time, take care, everyone.